I'd rather be with you. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. If you are here, please say hello in the chat so we don't feel alone with Greg. Like every day, it's Good Vibes Radio, and the main goal of this Good Vibe Radio is to keep the vibes up. And I'm very happy today to have an entrepreneur that I love, as every day, to be honest. But every day is a new day. How are you, Gregory?
I'm very well. Second day post-lockdown. We try to find the new routine as everybody. But I'm super fine. And yourself, Alice?
Feeling good. Just have my hair dry after the shower. I love this is new, right? Your beer?
The long beer. I have a beer for a while, but it's the first time in my life I didn't touch it for 2 months since the beginning of the lockdown. I get used to it. I go to the barber this afternoon, but I will keep a certain level of beard. And to be honest, I just discovered, thanks to Sama, Game of Thrones. So I'm very happy to have the proper look, in fact.
Ah, you want to be a character of Game of Thrones, that's why. I thought it was something spiritual, because I know you've been on a spiritual road as well during this confinement, and we're going to talk about this.
Sure.
First, Greg, let us know, what do you do? What's Leuwen?
Yeah, so I've been in banking for like 13 or 14 years. We worked with my partners for big banks for like more than 10 years, each of us. And we decided to do the same we used to do for big banks and big corporate. So it means...
Which banks? You were working at which bank?
We all met at Rothschild.
Rothschild.
Yeah. And actually, so what is Rothschild doing in the department I was working for? It's making merger and acquisitions, fundraising, debt advisory. So concretely, for you guys here who are entrepreneurs, sometimes you work with people like us. This means, let's say, you need to raise 10 million, you need to raise equity, you need to structure your debt. Your company is big and you want to sell it to a corporate. You take people like us, so basically, so it's advisory, so it's not banks lending you money, it's providing you advice, exactly like a lawyer, for example, and so, but for finance, and so we are going to help you to structure the deal. So if you want to raise money, you tell me, okay, my MRR is, let's say, 1 million a month, so we'll derive a value from it, and we say, okay, you're going to raise, let's say, 10 million, and together we will build like a pitch deck, a business plan, and we'll reach the best investors, and then negotiate with you and for you the term sheet and the deal.
And you mix investors with debt.
Yeah, so exactly. Most of the startups, for very old reasons, they used to work essentially with equity. So it's shares, and for a very long time, including companies from the NASDAQ like Microsoft and others, they had no debt, for the simple reason that a tech company, you never know how things will go. And so even though you have like a big revenues at some point, you're not sure you will still have your revenues, let's say in 2 years, 3 years. Now it's different because you have software, you have monthly billing, but historically it was mostly equity and not even private equity, it was risk capital, so venture capital. Things are changing progressively, and right now, especially with all the stake-backed loans you have in France, you have in UK, you have in Germany, tech companies, they are more and more used, and they will have to be actually used to have debt. So you're right, at least when we make a deal, we try to mix the good level of equity and debt, and things are changing very quickly with the COVID. So that's the first thing, raising money, raising debt, and then you can sell the companies. Let's say you can have the family company, exactly what happened with Captain Train, which was bought by Trainline. So you have a company with, let's say, being a leader in France, for example, and you're going to sell it to the leader of UK or Europe. We, of course, work a lot on that, and it was our initial DNA, because when you work for big banks, bulk of your job, like maybe 2/3, is an investment fund comes to you, say, I own 100% of this company, I want to sell it. And so you are going to make an auction, and I know at least you come from the art world, so it works the same. You're going to prepare the company, making a great deck, a great equity story. So we tell a story, exactly what you do with startups, and you're going to try to have the best mix in terms of price, governance, philosophy, because sometimes you don't want to sell to certain investors because you have like you want to have a fit in terms of culture, enterprise project. So you can say I want to sell to this kind of funds, to a family business, whatever. So we are going to work on that. And the third leg is all the purely financing. It means you just work on the debt. So you raise debt, you structure debt. So when it's good times, let's say you make what we call a leverage buyout. It means a fund is buying a company with debt, essentially, and a little portion of equity. And so the job of the financial advisor, it will be to find the good leverage. So how much times the EBITDA you raise. That's when everything goes fine. And sometimes when things get complicated, you need bankers that are going to renegotiate the debt for you. It's what we call restructuring. So it happens for every kind of companies. It's pretty sad times, but very important. It's exactly the same. If I tell you I have a very important disease, actually, if I take the disease sufficiently, early, I can deal with it. Restructuring, it's a lot like that. And so the sooner companies do it, the sooner you have a chance to recover properly. So actually, we did that for big companies, big startups, not only startups, but like companies who are seeing, I think my average before launching my company was like €500 million enterprise value company. So it was big company, sometimes much larger, sometimes smaller, but even though it was quite big deals. And we said, we are going to provide the same level of financial engineering, rigor, work, but to smaller companies. And we are targeting especially tech, so digital companies, startups, but also small and mid-cap firms.
So you come from this very old school and traditional background.
Yeah.
And you, Greg, we have had already in the past the chance to work together. You are able to adapt to another kind of users, to another kind of clients, which are entrepreneurs. And that's the main particularity of Leuwen, is to be able to have one fit in both worlds.
Yeah.
So before going to the mindset of, and because I'm sure we can learn a lot of how there are things you can adapt, there are things you cannot adapt, but just on the business opportunity, because if Rothschild wasn't really advising a startup, it was also for a very business reason, right?
Yeah, but now like more and more great traditional banks like Rothschild and a few others, they are great franchise in tech actually as well. They built it because right now it's a very old Nicolas Collin thesis, for instance. Nicolas nurtured me a lot. It's like you can have a small company today, like a seed or a Series A company today, and you never know if it won't worth 200 million like in 12 months actually, or 24 months. So everybody moved on this. Our strategy today, our positioning. So you're right. We are 99% of companies we work for, they are being built and controlled by entrepreneurs at some point, at least. So we are very entrepreneur driven, ourselves entrepreneur, but as you say, coming from like a very old school world. So the idea was to be a bridge between like traditional haute couture banking to entrepreneur startups. That's why when things are normal, our office are within the family, for example. So we are literally embedded with entrepreneur ourselves. We didn't want, we could have, just take office in the Ace district, and I love Parc Monceau, Faubourg Saint-Honoré. I mean, I lived there for a while. I still live next to it. So
you're such a dandy.
So it's a natural habitat. I mean, and we said, okay, we have to take offices with startups, in a more maybe creative, hipster, whatever, but in other kind of places. So let's say if I was in New York, I would have go to Brooklyn or Tribeca, but not Midtown for sure. That's what we did, creating our company, because the idea was to move from one world to the other, to be a bridge,
culturally, you needed to be surrounded by entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and physically, culturally, of course, meeting them, talking to them, almost step by step, dressing like them. Even though right now with all the confinement, I think the suits era is gone for a very long time, if not ever. And so, it was the idea. And what is sure, and it's fun because when I met you, Alice, in 2014, at that time, it's fun because I was the pure banking guy. I mean, it was one of the first time in my life I went out from the 8 and 7, almost kidding. And
7th district of Paris. I'm telling this for the international people who might be watching us.
Business
very posh areas of Paris.
Yeah, and so I was using apps like everybody. I love text. I mean, my father was kind of a geek, so I had my first Mac very early. So, and guys with PC were laughing at me. Apple is dead. We know the rest of the story. And so when I met you, it was like a brand new world for me. But at that time, what was pretty difficult for guys like me that wanted to burn the bridges, it's like it was pretty bilateral. You had like big companies on the one end with public funds, etc., kind of empire, and then you have the rebels, and with very few, in fact, exchanges between both. 6 years later, I think, especially thanks to your work and a lot of work of a few people, so the VCs, entrepreneurs, BPI, and others, I think now there are solid bridges. Everybody learned to understand the others. You even find it in terms of investment. A lot of corporate hired guys and girls from the tech world, and vice versa. So I think things are moving in the right way, and it's much less a cliche where you had and it was so much. I think a bad thing, you had like all the cliche about the startups, the ping pong tables and the big color balls, and you have the very serious world of La Défense.
It's much more intertwined.
Yeah, and there's like I love this world. There's a middle way, like in everything. And I think that's the key. Like sometimes you have to be radical, but once you made your point and you have solid principles, what you did with the family, I mean, no compromise with your principle. But when you're very sure of your values, of what you create, what you want to reach, you can open yourself to others. And I think it was really mutual. I mean, after all the acceleration, I mean, the Station F, the election of President Macron, and clearly France become in Europe a powerhouse thanks to this one.
All right. Can you give me just an idea of your business today? How many startups you've been accompanying? What is the KPI that you follow so that I can have the big picture?
Yeah. So sorry if I'm discreet on the names, but especially we work on debt a lot right now, and so we have to be super secretive. But happy to share it once it's closed, and it's pretty progressive. But so our business model usually is like helping companies to raise capital, selling companies, and the debt was our third leg already. With what happened with the COVID, the business, it was a kind of indirect pivot. And so a lot of business right now is on that. I would say we have like 10 active projects, of which maybe five new projects. When I say active, it's very active. It means at least 3-4 interactions a day is very live. We have to spend time on it. And so it's like 10, maybe slightly more than usual. And I think it's half equity, half debt, which is brand new. I mean, it used to be 80% equity, 20% debt. Regarding equity, what is very, very interesting right now, so as you know, funds are still raising money. You had the Partech fundraising, the Isaïe fundraising, the Infra via this morning. So it's pretty active all over the world in terms of funds raising money from limited partners. Startups are raising money every day. We see it. The impact, of course, of the COVID is like, a lot of investors will say, what are the business which are resilient? I mean, which company is still making money? Which company limited its losses? And which company thrives? And we had the chance. I mean, already in our portfolio, because we had it like pre-COVID or just at the beginning, a few projects in consumer businesses that are extremely active right now. And it was super solid business created by a great entrepreneur. for example, delivering food, stuff like that. And the business were doing great before. Great platform, great technical stack, great value for consumers, amazing stuff. I mean, people from other former employees coming back to help, extraordinary moments thanks to culture. And so those businesses are thriving. It means it can be 3 times, 4 times, 5 times what it used to be before the COVID, because of course you need to have people to deliver your food. For example, for the food business, we have other examples like in crypto, for example. So this kind of business, we had to stop a little bit, to put on hold for a few weeks just to see how numbers went, and just to be able to stabilize the story, the numbers. So right now, I mean, we are pretty clear. So those businesses are on the market right now. They are about to go on the market. So this is for the equity part. So what we've been chasing and looking after was the resilient business, or business that would be, I would say, COVID compatible. And of course, for others, we have to rate a little bit. And then we had the debt. And the debt was extremely important because, for people not for France, but they are the same dispositive in the UK, for example, or in Germany. So the French government really made like a very rapid and amazing job for every kind of companies, notably in tech, called PG. So it means it's loans that are backed by the state. So if the companies default on the loan, the state will cover 90% of the loan. So the banks take a risk on the 10 commercial banks, 10 remaining percent. So we help a lot of companies on those PG things. So it's a loan backed by the state, prêt garanti par l'État in France. Why? Because of course, for startups, there was a little bit of work, additional work, because a lot of startups, they have a very low level of equity. They are burning cash, but I mean, who doesn't when you are in tech and you are in a super growth? And so there was a kind of additional work than for a usual, let's say, retail company or restaurant business or whatever, because banks had to have a kind of security, understanding the business, the dynamic. So we are helping currently like a numerous startup on this. I would say at least a half a dozen, and we already have at least 4 or 5 successes on that. But it's ongoing because you have first part of the money, then you have additional dispositive, etc. So
we have a question from Gerald. He's asking about your business model. If you take upfront fees or success fees?
Yeah, it's mostly success fees, like the big part of the business success fees, and then we are a little bit Robin Hood. I mean, we are ourselves entrepreneurs. So let's say we are advising a company with very low revenues, burning a lot of cash, 2 months in bank, 2 months of cash in bank. We won't take a retainer. Depending on the size of the business, on the work to do. I mean, if you say, okay, I have the full documentation, everybody's ready, you just have to double check, and we check everything. I mean, we never deliver one spreadsheet or one deck or whatever if we don't understand 200% of what's inside. But depending on the quality, etc., we can charge a retainer. It's always a minority part of the business, but especially in debt, it's more retainer than in equity. So it depends, but it's mostly success.
So if I summarize a little bit what you said, do you think that COVID-19 will accelerate the fact that startup will go more for debt?
Yeah, definitely. What we think so I have a partner called Alexandre, former Rothschild guy in debt, and Alexandre is really one of the best experts in debt in the market. And before joining Leuwen a few months ago, he created his own startup after his time as a banker. Startup in sport. So he's very keen. His knowledge is very concrete. I mean, it's not the guy from Ivory Tower looking at startups because you use an iPhone or a Samsung. And so he used to raise debt for a startup. He's very at ease with that. What we want to defend and to promote right now, because of fundraising in equity can take times, amounts can vary, can change because of the COVID-19. We think companies should have a global strategy regarding their financing. So it means equity, so the shares, quasi-equity, so it's convertible, BSA, depends on the country, and debt. And then you have different kind of debt. You have state-backed debt, you have commercial debt, you have venture debt. So there are plenty of tools. And I think startups, especially startups, already generating significant revenues, already being at least, you don't have to make money on every part of your business, but let's say you have 3 divisions, or you are in 3 countries, it's always good to show that at least on one part of your business, you have a certain level of efficiency and you make money. Maybe it's not EBITDA level, maybe it can be a contributive margin level, but showing to bankers and I would say lenders, historically not in digital, that one day or the other you are going to tend to generate cash flows, EBITDA, etc. So even being like cost effective on 2 months, 3 months, one quarter, it's always a very, very good thing to raise debt. So yes, we strongly advise when it's possible, after analyzing very deeply the figures, to have a global strategy. And so you can raise money because, like, let's say you're losing time because of the COVID, so you lost 6 months in your equity fundraising, so you can bridge it with debt, for example, so it can work. You can make a great fundraising in equity. You have a very high level of capital, and you are strong, and you say, okay, I'm going to capitalize on this and raise more debts just to be able to seize opportunity, just to be able, I think it will be a very bad thing, but let's say there's a lockdown number 2 in November because numbers are terrible and the government has to do this. And right now with COVID-19, we can't exclude anything because we know we don't know anything or very, very less. So it means just sizing the debt opportunity to increase the lifetime value of your company and the cash, the treasure you have, just to hold more for your community, your employees, etc.
Excuse me, I was just wondering, would you say that you are like much more than just fundraiser? Because fundraisers used to do a part of your job, but you are adding to it the banking services.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect and for a lot of fundraisers. There are amazing people doing this, what we do for like 20 years. People, great fundraiser, began to work when I didn't even have my A level or just at my baccalaureate. Frankly, and so they've been doing that for a long time. They do a great job. They know companies very well. They went through cycles for sure. And most of their work is focused on raising money for amazing startups. And so that's what we do. We love to do this. We did it for a lot of startups, like a prop tech company called Lost and Fly, who raised $10 million last year. So I know how it works and what the interest, and it's still a big part of my business today. I said like at least 50% today. Anyway, it's more than that. We are really like corporate finance advisors. It means you give me your balance sheet, you give me your P&L, and we are going to find the growth structure. That's why we are very keen on working on debt. That's why when we raise money for a company, you can never exclude you're going to sell the company, because your fiduciary duty as an entrepreneur, as a shareholder, let's say you want to raise 5 million, you are a software company, and Microsoft arrives and say, okay, I want to hire you and I want to buy you for 150 millions. What happened for Sunrise, for example, with Microsoft, it's pretty tough to say no. At least you have to consider it seriously, not always saying yes. Yahoo wanted to buy Facebook for 1 billion. People said Zuckerberg made an amazing mistake, and finally we know the rest. So it's not binary, but our view is really global. So it's really the debt, the equity, minority, majority.
I get it.
I prefer the really like a financial advisor world than just fundraiser, because fundraiser is a part. But not
I know. It's a provocation. I'm being provocative. You talk a lot. Huh? I know you are also a teacher at Sciences Po. I would love to be one of your students, because I'm sure it's pretty intense. Greg, tell me a little bit what you've been thinking and how you've been analyzing this crisis from your standpoint. I'm interested by both views, personal and professional.
Yeah. Our life, at least same for you, professional and personal are pretty interconnected right now. It's very tough to say who is my client, my friend, my partner. But
it's important to keep some personal space.
But regarding like all the business thing, and we all know that I mean things were great economically. Stock markets were amazing. Employment numbers were great. GDP growth. Of course, still tough for a lot of people, but I mean overall in the business environment, it's a great time to work, to invest, to create. Amazing entrepreneur for executive. Very easy, like to be an entrepreneur, all the freelancing movement. But what we knew, like for 10 years in a row, it was pretty high growth, high numbers, a lot of successes, and mathematically, I mean, you talk about the great Mark Fiorentino, we both know. When you read Mark's newsletters from January, February, even December, November, you say, okay, something's going to happen. I mean, this super cycle has to end. And economically, from a mathematical standpoint, it cannot last forever. I mean, you know, trees don't grow to the sky. And so people looked at all the macroeconomics, where can it comes from? I mean, when there have been a very high level of tensions in Iran, early January, when a very important general was assassinated by the US, people thought maybe it's the beginning of something, you know, high tensions, and finally it didn't happen. Then, beginning of the COVID, when we heard about it in January, when I did, for example, we thought maybe it's the thing. And finally, at the first place, it seemed to be under control. It would not come to us, even though everybody was traveling hard time. And finally, it arrived. So when that thing that people call the black swan, so you all know what is the black swan. I think the black swan, it was popularized by Nassim Taleb, a great economist, hedge fund manager, and mathematician. And so it's something that arrives and you didn't spot it at all. It's a total surprise. But here, the COVID is not what we call a black swan, because I mean, it was in the radar for months, right? You know, maybe more. People say maybe November, maybe December. But it was this amazingly terrible event that kind of stopped the growth. And so professionally, it's how so the big thing arrived, and it arrived bigger, stronger, extraordinary, tough to deal with. I mean, if I was today a member of a government, I mean, that's why I think we have to be very humble. Us, we are just commentating what's happening. We're not like leading, you know, the country. It's super tough to resolve the equation in a good way. So in terms of business, this is the terrible event that kind of broke the growth, at least at one point. So now the question will be how it will like go back to normal, catch up. And so this is a super crisis, the second for my generation or yours, because we knew 2008, 2009. This one is different because it's depending on health. I mean, 2008 or 9, it was tough, and believe me, beginning a career of banking at that time was really, really tough. People lost their job. It was extraordinarily tense. Even though in Paris we were a little bit more protected because so Paris is always lagging a little bit compared to London and New York or other places. But that thing, I mean, we have to deal with financial problems, growth issues, employment issues, and to deal with health. And I think that's it's pretty terrible when you wake up in the morning and you say, I mean, frankly, when I check my Twitter, I say, is it a nightmare? Because people just talk about that. So from business, I mean, okay, it's a very, very big threat. How can we like stay safe and after all this, maybe learn some stuff, invest in the good companies, advising the good people, trying to help concretely people. And what I've loved with my job for like the last 2 months is when you help a company raising money, it's always very important because it means creating jobs, it means creating value, it means you help someone to reach her or his dream. So that's always important. You create value for shareholders, clients, etc. So that's great. Right now, when you help companies saying, okay, I have to file, you know, a loan request to my bank, you know that if the company doesn't get the loan, there's a pretty high probability that it will go down in a couple of weeks, couple of months. So it's much more concrete. It's much more short term because when you raise debt, you aim to have the debt in 1 month, 2 months, it can be 3 months, but I mean, it's shorter than an equity cycle for sure. So that's what I learned from a business perspective, is just how we go through this crisis, and especially for me as an entrepreneur, because the former one, I was working for a bank, I was much more protected. Like when you are an entrepreneur working for other entrepreneur in a very unstabilized world like this, you have, to paraphrase Nicolas, you have zero safety net, basically, compared to my former life. From a personal perspective, I would say, and people feel a lot about that, everything was amazing, frankly. Like you talk about December 19 or January, at least when you work in tech and advisory, working with entrepreneur, lot of travels, lot of seeing, lot of engagements. I mean, personally, I was traveling like part-time, visiting like lately, I mean, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Canada, like in 1 month and a half, and Germany and Switzerland, etc. Meeting amazing people.
Among your clients, you have a non-French startups?
I would say directly and indirectly, like active, inactive, like half a dozen at least. But when you travel, I mean, it's pretty interesting, because when you travel, it's really for the middle term. It's rarely short term.
Yeah, of course. Have you seen some differentiation between the reactions from French entrepreneurs versus Israeli entrepreneurs versus UK entrepreneurs? Because I've seen some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that, I mean, at this stage, not that much. I think it depends a lot on the kind of ecosystem, on the kind of businesses. Let's say you take an Israeli startup. Most of the Israeli startups, like it's mobility, it's security. So the business model, it's a lot of software. So like the business model is, of course, much less impacted if you are like a B2B delivery business in a country with an amazing lockdown. For sure, like nothing happened. So I think it depends on the kind of businesses that were involved. But globally, what I want to say to entrepreneurs here, it's people have been amazingly resilient. The energy is great, and what surprised me the most in this business when I entered it like full time almost 3 years ago, it's like the positive energy. People never complaining, even though sometimes you don't have a fixed salary, you don't really know if it would work out. Even though it works, it takes a lot of time, much more time than getting a bonus in finance. So it's different kind. I mean, it's not. I don't judge. I say different, but the motivation is different too. And when you are an entrepreneur, I mean, raising money is tough, dealing with competition, dealing with your partners, dealing with government rules, etc. So it's really like adversity. Succeeding to adversity, basically, and sometimes you can be happy, and when you're happy, you never know what will come next, right? And people always smiling, always how do you do, how do you feel, a lot of empathy. It's not naive to say that, but really trying to care, to understand others, and the positivity. And my God, never complaining. I mean, frankly, even after like 12, 25 meetings when you want to raise capital, each time you make the new meeting, the level of energy is the same. And it's not me telling, oh, be nice. I mean, I don't have to. We don't have to with my partners. It's pretty genuine. And that's what struck me. And so I think the COVID was personally an amazing stress test. And that's what I wanted to say, because people, so we had this life, we said, okay, we understand how it works, we travel, we meet a lot. It's pretty like, of course, like it's a challenge, but it's interesting. And right now, you have this amazing thing you have to deal with. And so personally, I think it was it's an amazing human experience.
Have you been on your own in Paris during this?
Yes, I've been on my own. It's not the funniest time in my life, for sure. I mean, it was one of the first time lately it was alone in the last 5 or 6 years. So of course it's a pretty challenge, but I think I was desperately needing this time on my own. Being able to focus, I mean, very concrete, you are an entrepreneur here, but how you manage a home, how you cook, how you deal with your time, you are in a closed environment, how you keep great relationship with people, even though you can't meet them. And I'm pretty amazed. I mean, frankly, I knew I had great friends and partners and clients, whatever. But the COVID confirmed that like 10 times or 100 times. I mean, people were great. People felt how you felt, so they would call. I mean, it's fun because a few times I had some down moment, let's say on Sunday afternoon, because on the week I was so busy. I mean, I could not. I had not minutes for me, between like 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. or much more. And on Sunday, 3 p.m. after lunch, like you say, okay, I'm pretty lonely, it's not very fun. And then you have that friend or that friend calling you. And it's almost a spiritual connection, And so for me,
I follow you on Instagram, and I can get your spiritual creativity as well in your stories. For me, the stories on Instagram is really accessing to the mind, to really the inner voice of the people. And I love your inner voice because it's a poet, it's a dandy, mixing the newsletters of big bankers that might be interesting, and as well the last song of Drake on Spotify, and the last spiritual quote from Rabbi, I don't know what.
Le mail.
Yes. Gerald is asking a question. How do you think a bank, a lender, will analyze a business plan for 2020 and 2021? It's hard to build a business plan right now, and banks, lenders don't like uncertainty.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting question, Gerald. What we advise on this is to be genuine. I mean, today, nobody in the world, like the best analyst for the government, the best investor of all times, nobody knows. Like it's the Leonard Cohen song. I mean, nobody knows for sure. But what we
Which song is it? This one?
Nobody knows or something.
Okay.
No. I know the Leonard Cohen song. It's everybody knows.
Ah.
So in my case, it's Leonard Cohen, but the country. It's nobody knows. Or everybody knows. We know nothing. So what we advise is like first to be very, very precise on the historical numbers. So your monthly numbers, March, April, the current trading, even in May, etc. And then you have to make what we call the best effort. I mean, we try to be very genuine in the projection. So you do your best. And then you can update your bankers regularly on what's happening. But it's really like it's second guessing what's happening. Just not to be like what we advise, especially with banks, not to be over conservative, not to be over optimistic, just to show, because after that's what people call the bank case. So a bank can over analyze what you do. So just try to, you have to share exactly how you would share things with your investors in total trust. And I think today to be genuine, to be trustful, to be a very goodwill is super, super key. And you talk about debt a lot, Alice. I mean, for startups, having relationship with banks was not natural because you had the VC money. You did not really kind of care. You had a digital bank, etc. You barely knew the name of your advisor in the bank, commercial bank. I mean, and it's very important to have good relationship with the banks as you have good relationships with your equity investor. What is good with the banks? Like you have a lot of banks in the market, not that much, less than 10 years ago, probably more than in 3 or 4 years, but still you have a few big banks, mutual bank, historically a commercial bank, etc. You have a lot of advisors. You can be based in Paris and you have your bank in Strasbourg, for example, or in Aix-en-Provence. You have to find the good person, understanding your business, helping the banks to generate fees as well. So it means like, with what banks you work, so your Stripe, it goes to this account or this account. So it's really building trust, building like a healthy relationship with the banks, and then it helps a lot. And a big part of our job basically is like to try to help startups to build this relationship. And what I say here, I mean, we made a lot of webinar and of pro bono sessions. Of course, office hours with startups will not necessarily work for them afterwards. But one of the big messages was building healthy relationships, exactly like with what you do in equity.
Mm-hmm. Michael is advising Gerald to be much more pessimistic on the business plan. Would you say the same?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you take the BP are on Excel, because when you are on Excel, then you can play with it, you can amend it, and so you always have like management case, optimic case, bank case, lots of very very fun Instagram accounts on this, because so people say, okay, what is because the best case of the morning became the worst case of the morning. The day after it was like 3 times worse, etc. It was COVID worse, COVID adjusted, and so on. But so of course, like people would take a BP and can say, what if it's you can make me more pessimistic, for sure,
Mm-hmm.
and more optimistic too. I mean, frankly, it's very flexible.
If I really don't want to talk to any bankers, I should go talk to you, if I understand well, Greg?
If you have no bankers, or you have very big relationship issues with your bankers, we can be kind of a banking coach. Yeah.
Gerald is asking, okay, but what is the bank mindset right now regarding the client prospect, new credit request? Are they going to be more strict or ask higher standard? And we see like a lot of communication. I'm listening to the radio every day, and the only ad that I hear is come to my bank for entrepreneurs. We are here, blah blah blah.
Yeah, actually, to get the state-backed loans, it was pretty hard to open new accounts at least during the last few weeks or months, because banks were strongly advised, and they made an amazing job, because they dealt with, I don't know, maybe 30 times, 40 times the usual level of work. Don't forget, they are not necessarily used to work from home, for security reasons. So they had to deal with that, to adapt a lot. But at the beginning, at least, it was focused on the current portfolio. So it was pretty tough to open accounts. I think it's changing progressively. So first thing, you can become the new client of a bank, but again, I think you have to build trust. So it means if you open a new account, you have to show a part of the flows of your company will go to that bank. It's how the rating works and everything. For good reasons. Our more strict. I mean, for all the state-backed loans, there are pretty clear rules that have been dictated by the government. Rules can change a little bit from day to day, but still, it's pretty transparent. So if you do a good project, if the file is clear, your project is clear, the rules are the rules. Will they be stricter for other kind of loans without, I would say, the state backing them? Yeah, for sure. I think the risk spread is going to rise. It's pretty mechanical, because the overall level of risk of the country is higher. And I think in life, it's a joke I make all the time, but I think it's pretty true. It's what we learn in modern finance. It's a couple between risk and yield. And the more risk you have, or you bear, the more yield you request. So if the risk is higher, the interest rate is going to go higher as well, even though the state, the risk-free rate are very low, etc. But I think we can wait for that. I mean, eventually it should be tougher.
Are you optimistic?
I'm realistic and optimistic, both, in my life in general, by the way, because I think we cannot underestimate all the challenges going on. I think, I don't want to paraphrase the Prime Minister, which is making a big job to help to deal with the crisis, but I think it's kind of just the beginning. I mean, if we were in a TV show, so season 1, denial, season 2, lockdown, season 3, first unlockdown. I'm not sure what's going to happen next, but what you showed, like the violence of what we did to the economy in order to save lives, which was very important and amazingly beautiful in terms of spirituality, but for sure, consequences in terms of unemployment, wealth destruction, the level of debt of the government, etc. It will, and globally, I mean, in all over the world, for the first time in history, it will have consequences. And so we don't know yet what are all the consequences. And then regarding the COVID itself, we have to check how things go and will be a second wave or not and when, etc. But we are not totally at ease with. It's not the end of a war when you can say, okay, we just made peace with the enemy, and right now we are rebuilding what happened in the 40s and 50s with the Marshall Plan. We're not in this state of mind right now. So that's I would say, pessimistic. At least I'm not sure all the bad things have happened yet. Why I'm optimistic? I'm optimistic because on the other hand, I think our generation, and it was a little bit, I didn't end my sentence, but personally, a lot of people, never really went through big crises with amazing, spiritual, philosophical, financial, security challenges. And so we all know we were much like, there's this sentence, from Paul Valéry at the end of the war. He said, now we know we can die. And I think it's exactly the same. So even though we are of the technology, we think we're very smart at dealing with things in life. Now we know, we can be put in London in half an hour. We can stay blocked for 2 months without being able to see our family, our friends. We can meet people, with people we loved. I have indirect people in my entourage that I really appreciated that died. Mostly old people, but though. So we all know that right now. So I think it's a very good reminder to be humble. So I think that's my optimism. Maybe people will be different in the way we behave, but at least the hubris. So hubris, like when you are too much self-confident, maybe it will lower a little bit. Then I think it will make people tougher on the other hand, because once you've been through a crisis, you're much tougher. Like if you navigate and you've been to a storm, for sure the time after you will know how to appreciate calmer times. So that's my optimistic way. Like people will get stronger. For those that are still here, we don't have to forget a lot of people suffered a lot lately. And then in terms of business, I think what is going to happen will be very interesting, because everything that was still here, the digitalization, it's a big thesis of what you've done with Oussama, Nicolas, Balthazar, and all the other analysts for a long time. Right now it's absolutely obvious. The world went through digital. An investor I follow on Twitter said, now I almost live in Chrome. So that happened to me as well. So clearly, a very strong accelerator. People that were already well digitalized, they've been through much better than the others, and for the best. It doesn't mean we'll have less social interaction, but maybe much more interesting that traveling 4 hours to have a 45 minutes meeting that leads to sometimes not a lot of things. So
why? There is no reason now. No reason.
So we'll optimize. We'll optimize our time, the quality of the relationship of the people we meet in business, in private, etc. That's the good thing, and I hope also. Again, my fear in life. I don't want to be naive, but I really think one very important thing emerged during this crisis, this catastrophe, is good heart.
All right. I'm just going with the flow with you. I love to listen to you, but it's already 1:08. We have a last question from Michael. So thank you for being confident. What do you think of the future fundraising tech IB boutique? Will you be tougher on the companies you will accompany? And last question from Nathalie. Do you think that digital economy is the own issue?
I don't think I understand the last question.
No, I don't understand. Is the main issue? Oh la la, so many questions. Why Leuwen website is still one page? Come on, dude. Your website is not a website.
Okay. It's a landing page. So I'm answering.
It's not even a landing page. Come on. I'm teaching you how to build a landing page to the goal. Not a landing page.
Surprise. So, Michael, I think, frankly, like all my colleagues, counterparts from other boutiques, financial advisors, etc., they are still working very hard to help the ecosystem, help the startup. It's a big solidarity, clearly, and people want to be useful. By the way, if you're not useful in COVID-19 times, I don't know when you can be useful in general, by the way, not only for business. So we'll for sure continue to be with, to work with great startups. We'll not be tougher. We've always been very, very keen on being very careful, when we onboard companies. Of course, just all the criteria will be clearly modified by what's happening. And so let's say, so personally, my view will be if there's a COVID-19 or COVID-20 or 21, how will things go? But it doesn't mean you don't have to help companies that are working in a normal way, but we have to find a good balance. And when you work for advisors, you have a portfolio as well, kind of indirect portfolio. And I will try at least that a good part of the business will be hedged by resilient and not just resilient, like anti-fragile businesses, for sure.
All right. All right. It's the end, my friend. It was a pleasure. I think we will leave on Leonard Cohen. I will put your favorite song, Everybody Knows.
And the website is on track. It will be live in May.
This one, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows that the day is so low.
All right, everybody. It was a pleasure. See you tomorrow for another interview with another amazing guest.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you, everyone.
Wait. Tomorrow, right now, you can actually meet with other people.
Okay, cool. I will.
Yes, you can network in the networking. So everybody is invited to network with the giant chat roulette. It's a super cool experience. And you meet randomly every 5 minutes someone who has been following this interview.
Okay, so I click on networking, right?
You click on networking, and every 5 minutes you will meet someone. See you, everybody. Bye-bye.